The Variety Artist, episode 16. This one's all about ventriloquism as a superpower. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your phone or mobile device. It really helps me a lot. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. They're offering you, the Variety Artist, a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at thevarietyartist.com/book. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Just go to thevarietyartist.com/book right after this podcast and get your free audiobook. Now let's start the show.
Welcome to The Variety Artist, providing aspiring artists and entertainers with in-depth discussions from top performers from all over the world. So get ready to book some gigs, make some money, and have some fun with your host, John Abrams.
When he was 8 years old in Atlanta, Georgia, his parents were so concerned with his tendency to talk to himself, they had him examined for multiple personality disorder. That same talking to himself without moving his lips has taken him around the world, paid for his home, and introduced Mark to his wife of 30 years. Atlantic City Magazine awarded him Best Variety Act for his performance. Variety Artists, I give you Crystal Cruz's Entertainer of the Year, ventriloquist Mark Merchant.
And the crowd goes wild.
How's it going, Mark?
It's going great. It's going great from one side of this lovely continent to the other. It's a pleasure to be talking to John Abrams, the Variety Artist.
Perfect. And you're out in Atlanta, Georgia?
I am. I'm a native Atlantan. I'm, as I say in my show sometimes, I'm not black and I'm not gay, but I live in Atlanta anyway, and that's not offensive or politically incorrect. It's just a fact, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, tell me, we're going to talk about cruises, and we're going to talk about being politically incorrect. That's one of the things on my list. Well, let's go back now. My friend Annie Benani, she says that everybody has a superpower. And your superpower seems to be ventriloquism, throwing your voice to another place. So I was reading on your bio that when you were in high school, you used to throw your voice into the PA system to get yourself taken out of class and other pranks.
I would. It was in the 7th grade, which was still elementary school, and in the 8th grade, which was high school. I had developed my ventriloquism to the fact that I could produce a startlingly real distant voice, and I could only get away with it with a substitute teacher. I would usually be close to the desk, and then I would call attention. I would look up at the speaker and say, "What?" And then when I would do the distant voice, Mark Merchant, to the front office, and the substitute teacher would, sure, and the rest of the class would be like, "Man, how does he do that?" But I could never do it with a real teacher because they knew I was a ventriloquist because I had performed for my class a few times and done, student talent shows and things like that.
So they knew if that voice came out of the speaker, if it was a regular teacher, they said, "Oh, Mark." Right.
They just say, "Okay, Mark, stop it." Back to algebra, which I use so much now in my real life. Algebra.
Yeah, you and me both.
I never know why they say pi r square, because every pie I've ever eaten, pi r round. I don't just throw that in.
Yeah, pi r. All right, so you went to college after your high school, after your crazy PA system antics. You went to college, and you went to college for journalism or dental hygiene. I read two different things.
Both. I went to University of Georgia School of Journalism, majoring in broadcast journalism, and worked at the college radio station, and actually worked at a radio station in Atlanta. I was one of the unruly weekenders, they used to call us, because we were the guys just doing some of the weekend shifts. And, Atlanta was a major market, and we were constantly getting calls from the program director like, "You're playing stuff out of format." But, when you were only making $5 an hour, it seemed like it didn't matter. And the girlfriend I had at the time was in dental hygiene school. She had just gone to dental hygiene school, and she was telling me how hard it was. And being Mark Merchant, I said, "Well, I bet I could get into dental hygiene school." And she said, I don't think you could. The test is very hard. Well, I took the dental hygiene aptitude test, and the next fall, I was the first male student that Clayton College had in their dental hygiene program.
Oh.
at one point, I was going to 2 colleges at one time. I was going to Clayton College, taking a 2-year associate's degree in dental hygiene, and I was finishing up my bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism at Georgia State University. And I got through 1 year, John, of dental hygiene school and never let any of the 32 women who were in my class that I was a performer. And which was hard. I kept it under wraps. Well, then at the end of the first year, the girls in my class, the ladies in my class, they said, we should do something for the graduating class, and let's give them a party. And somebody said, let's have some entertainment.
Of course.
And I said, oh, well, I know a few people that are entertainers. I can get somebody to come and do something. Well, of course, the person that was coming to do something was me, because they had a budget of $100, and I wanted that $100.
Yeah.
And I came and I did a bit of magic, and I also did ventriloquism, and I also did, if I don't mind saying, a spot-on impression of the dentist who was the head of the program, Dr. Leonard Schreiber. What a great human being. And I got great laughs. And I'll never forget, this was a real teachable moment. At the end of the performance, Dr. Schreiber came up to me and just quietly, he said, Mr. Merchant, why are you wasting your time in dental hygiene school? This is what you should be doing. You obviously have a real passion and a real talent for this. And I said, well, Dr. Schreiber, I've only got a year left of dental hygiene school. I don't want to quit. And he said, I'm not suggesting you quit. And he looked at me, and as two men who understand each other, he said, I'll make sure you graduate. There'll be no problems. And it wasn't like I got a free pass. I still had to do my work. But anytime I was cleaning somebody's teeth, and we had, you had to go find people in the college like, hey, you need your teeth cleaned. And when you're learning to clean teeth, it takes 3 hours. So, and he would come in and he would just stick the mouth mirror in whoever's teeth I was cleaning. And he'd go, excellent job, Mr. Merchant. And he'd write me an A. And he kind of give me a little wink and a nod, like, I know you're not going to do this for a living. And so I graduated from Clayton College with my associate's degree in dental hygiene. Mm-hmm. And 2 quarters later, I graduated with my Bachelor of Arts in broadcast journalism from Georgia State. All the time I'd been doing shows and getting paid for them since I was about 12, 13 years old. I did magic and ventriloquism because the first performer that I saw live combined both art forms, a gentleman in Atlanta named Clem Fortner, who I saw when I was 8 years old. That's how I got interested in magic and ventriloquism. So I thought if you did magic, you did ventriloquism.
Sure.
That's what I was doing. And I was working at a bank part-time, or not. I went full-time, and I hated that. And then I got a job as a dental hygienist, and I did that for about 5 months. But during that 5-month period, I had 1 week where I was the MC of a show at a shopping mall in Atlanta. It was the grand opening of a big, at the time, la-di-da shopping mall called Perimeter Mall. And they were having a Disney Mickey Mouse show. And they had the licensed costumes. And they just got some college people to dress up as Mickey, Goofy, and Pluto. And they needed a Mouseketeer MC. And this is the voice of the Mouseketeer MC, me. Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to the Mickey Mouse Club. And I got paid $450 for that. Yeah, this was 1977, John.
You're on fire.
No, pardon me, 1978. And I'm like, that's when that hook really was in me, that this is what I need to be doing. And I went back to cleaning teeth.
How old are you at the time?
23.
Okay.
23. I went back to cleaning teeth, but hated it. And one day in July of 1978, I was cleaning someone's teeth at Dr. Connor and McDevitt's office to periodontist. And the phone rang, and it was the office manager. And she said, Mark, your mother's on the phone. She says it's important. Now, my mother is a nurse, and I knew she wouldn't call me. So I thought there was something wrong. And I went and I said, hi, Mom, what's up? And she says, Mark, a gentleman from Carnival Cruise Lines named Mike Nett just called and wants to know if you would like to go work on a cruise ship doing your ventriloquism. And here's his number. So I called the number right away. And the way that Carnival Cruise Lines found out about me was I had sent a resume to a lot of places wanting a job in the office doing public relations or journalism related things, because I knew how to do that, and I thought I could write good copy. But on my resume at the time, in the bottom, I put special abilities, magic and ventriloquism.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow that resume got shuttled to someone in the entertainment office at Carnival at the time, in the infancy of Carnival. They had 2 ships, the Mardi Gras and the Carnival, and they offered me a job to come on board. Of course, they didn't tell me I was doing 16 hours of crew staff work a day too, but it gave me the opportunity to, there's still a patient somewhere in Atlanta dental office with a saliva ejector in her mouth that goes, because she's thinking I'm going to come back, and finish. But I left the dental hygiene. I still keep my license up just in case.
Oh, wait. So was that it? That was it for the dental hygiene and the journalism?
That was it and the journalism certainly comes into play more than the dental hygiene ever did, because I write my material, and I think in order to write material, you've got to have a flair for writing. And
well, let's talk about when you put a show together. So you get a new character, and in fact, I'm going to read something so that way our audience can kind of know a little bit about your act. The Reno Gazette commented, "This act is politically incorrect and makes fun of its own political incorrectness by pointing out the ridiculous nature of that term. He and his friends are a talented and good-humored team." So I've watched a number of your videos, and a lot of them deal with what's current and what's happening at the time. Do you have a problem with that political correctness thing going on when you're watching TV, or you're doing some sort of routine about pop culture?
I don't have a problem with political correctness or political incorrectness. If I see something that really offends me due to either my faith or what I believe, it's real easy. I just hit the remote button and turn the television off. If I'm at a live performance and I saw someone that, hey, this really isn't for me, I would wait until an appropriate break and I would leave, and I wouldn't say anything about it.
Sure.
So I don't have a problem with it, but we do live in a society now where I feel like people sometimes are waking up like, what can I be offended at today? And the topicalness of my material, I've always liked talking about what's been going on in the world or what is going on in the world. The problem is, and this was pointed out to me one time by the great magician Billy McComb, God rest his soul, with whom I had the pleasure of working with on cruises in the 80s. I remember he said, and I don't do a good Billy McComb impression, but he said, "Lad, you've got your work cut out for you with topical material. You have to keep changing." And it's true. It's true. You do have to keep, because topical material has a shelf life. And you'll know when the joke is like, okay, that's not funny anymore. Sometimes a topical joke will surprise you and will still be relevant for longer than you think it should be. But as long as it's getting a laugh, I'm going to keep it in, because that way it becomes an evergreen instead of just a sprig in the forest. It's going to blossom and then not blossom anymore.
I talked about this with Eric Sharp on one of my podcasts before. We talked about doing topical comedy. When you do topical pop culture comedy, it can last anywhere from a week all the way to a year. Or in his case, he talked about the OJ Simpson thing, where 20 years ago it was hilarious because he did a number of OJ Simpson references, and then it died out. And then recently, maybe 6 months ago, there was some big special. I think it was the 20-year anniversary of the OJ Simpson incident. And so he started using that routine again, the exact same routine that he used 20 years ago. It became funny again because it was in the news again.
And Eric is exactly right. I don't know Eric, but it's like I have a soul brother of whom I don't know, because the same thing happened to me. The OJ Simpson reference that I was doing back in 1994, 95.
Yeah.
It fell off the radar. And then when he either got out of prison because of his breaking and entering, what did he get? He was in prison in Nevada, I believe, for armed robbery.
Right. It was something about he had some of his own memorabilia. Someone had bought some of his memorabilia. So he went into a casino and went into, I think it was a hotel room where some of his old memorabilia was that somebody else owned. And he said, that's mine. And he went to take it and locked them in the room. And so he was charged with kidnapping, I think, because he locked these people in the room.
And I believe there was a gun involved. I think he had a gun with him, which
I think you're right.
I think if here's a memo to all of you budding criminals out there: if you get away with murder, don't downgrade to armed robbery. Just just try to stay out of jail.
Just wear the murder charge.
Whatever. OJ Simpson was in the audience one time after he'd gotten out of jail when I was working a club in the Bahamas in Freeport, and people kept saying, "Mark, you do an OJ joke. He's going to be in the audience tonight." And I said, I pulled a Jim Morrison like in the Doors. I said, I'm not changing it. And to his credit, he either appeared to laugh at it, and he did not meet me backstage with a knife. So I'm thinking I got away with it.
You lived to tell about it.
Yeah. I love it when there's someone who can take a joke about themselves. Also in the Bahamas, the great boxer, middleweight boxing champion for a while, Marvin Hagler, was in the audience. And I'm on stage with my African-American character, Alonzo. And I'm the specialty act in this review show. So I'm the only one who can really talk to the audience. Everything else, all the music is on a track. So none of the singers could stop and say, hey, because they'll lose the track. I'm able to, in a moment, say, hey, we need to recognize in the audience a former middleweight champion of the world, marvelous Marvin Hagler, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, the spotlight was on him, and he stood up. He was sitting in King's Row, as they call it in a casino, and waved. And my black puppet, Alonzo, looked up and said, he don't look so bad. I bet I could kick his butt. And Marvin Hagler, to his credit, started beating his hand on the table, laughing and pointing back like, hey, man, you all right? So I appreciated that. I did a corporate show in Beverly Hills a few years ago, and Buzz Aldrin, the second man on the moon, was sitting the stage right. And I knew some dignitaries were going to be there, and I had prepared. And with my lady character, Zelda, I said, Zelda, there's Commander Buzz Aldrin. I said, he was third in his class at West Point and the second man on the moon. And Zelda said, poor guy, he can't come in first for anything. Which, to Buzz Aldrin's credit, he started laughing. So did the rest of the audience. But they kind of looked at Buzz Aldrin for permission. Like, is it okay to laugh at this? Which if it's funny, it's funny. As my friend Jack Goldfinger, a great magician and the booker of talent at the Magic Castle, he said, Mark, funny is funny, but funny doesn't trump mean.
Yep.
So I make a real effort in my humor to never be mean, to never be mean-spirited. I just want people to laugh. Sometimes people will get upset at a joke, not directed at them, but directed at somebody else. And I never understand that.
Sure. I have to be really careful now. I do mainly school assemblies is my thing. And I think over the past 20 years, I've slowly changed the different shows that I do because I don't want to offend anybody. I've gotten complaints for things that I think are completely fine, but people have complained about it because they've been offended by something that I've said. And I think it's fine.
School shows. I've done plenty of school shows. I met my wife by doing school shows. And like you say, John, I'm always amazed at the things that could come back to haunt you at a school show. And when I was doing a school show, I was doing them through a magician friend of mine. I'm sure you know David Ginn.
Yeah.
David was pretty much acting as a booking agent because he had overflow, and he would do the paperwork and I would just show up and do the shows. So I knew that I didn't just have my reputation on the line. I had his reputation on the line, and David is one of my best friends. I wouldn't be a performer today had I not met David Ginn, all credit due. So when I would do a school show, especially one that he had booked me, which was most of them, I knew I had to be on my best behavior. And every now and then you get a message back like, oh, so-and-so was offended by, I'll give you an example that just, I'm sure you know the paper hat trick where you take two pieces of paper and tear them up and make a paper hat.
Right.
Well, there's also a version of that where you tear up two pieces of paper and it makes like a pair of, they're like, I would call them bloomer underwear. They're pink and they have like, the flower but they're big, like boxer short things. And I would do it with a girl and a boy, and I would make the girl a hat. And then I would say to the boy, I'm going to make you a hat. And as I was tearing it up, and it would obviously end up being the underwear, but I would just take it and put it upside down on his head, and it would get a big laugh. And at one school show, David called me and he said, Mark, you better not do the paper tear with the pants, the goofy looking underpants, because you got a complaint that, that was inappropriate for an elementary school. But
right.
It wasn't like a bikini. It wasn't like a magician doing the dreaded bra trick.
Oh yeah.
For, I read something on Facebook recently about some kid performer thought it was appropriate to do the bra trick at an elementary school with like a 10-year-old girl.
Yeah, I read that exact same thing.
I mean, I think that trick, even with an adult in this day and age, is kind of it's probably inappropriate.
Yeah, it is inappropriate. For those of you that aren't magicians that are listening to this, basically the bra trick is, it appears that you're pulling somebody's bra out of their shirt. That's what it appears to be. And probably 20 or 30 years ago, it may have been funny, but nowadays people are offended by it. Absolutely.
But let me ask you, John, do you hold the same? Do you think that the male version of that trick, which I believe was called Houdini Outstripped, where you tie two big handkerchiefs together, you have a male spectator and he just puts him, right down, just puts the knot down the front of his pants. You don't do it. And when you pull them out,
right,
there's a big pair of underwear between them.
Yeah. The answer to that is, I am not personally offended by something like that, but I probably wouldn't do it in a school show. I may not even do it in a corporate event, just because I'd be afraid that someone would be offended by it. If you perform in front of enough people, someone is going to be offended by it. And you don't want that wrong person to be offended. If someone complains to the boss, the person that hired you, and then that complaint gets around, well, it's not a good situation.
No, as Crystal Cruise Lines, which is one of my biggest accounts and clients, thank you, God, for the opportunity of entertaining on Crystal. Very distinguished audience. They're usually wealthy people and intelligent people, and they like my material, they like my show. But as a cruise director with that line, Paul McFarland told me, he said, you've got to remember, Mark, at Crystal, it's not how many you please, it's that one person that you upset. Because that one person you upset, they're spending so much money to be on that cruise, they don't want to be upset. And sometimes they'll take you to task, and you'll get that dreaded meeting with the cruise director with so-and-so was not pleased with a couple of jokes in your show, and you're like, hey.
Yeah. You don't want to lose your job because one person out of the 400 people that you entertained was offended.
Right, which is, when you look at the percentage in comedy, it's, especially this day and age, I think it is just so difficult to go out there and make people laugh. And there's so many in this time that we live in now, when people are so on edge about anything. You can think, okay, I've vetted this. Nothing's going to be offensive about this. And then somebody comes to you and they're offended about something. And I'm like, huh, what? You chose that? I don't get it.
Well, you're right. When you were talking about earlier, some people just wake up in the morning and say, what am I going to be offended by today?
Yeah. A great example of that way back. Let's go way back in the Wayback Time Machine. In 1986, I was working on the Royal Viking Line, and I had a Ronald Reagan puppet. It was made by Axtell Studios.
Oh, yeah, Steve Axtell here in Ventura County.
Right. Great. And it was a latex, typical puppet made by Axtel, and it was a Ronald Reagan character. When I would bring him on the cruise ships, the band would play "Hail to the Chief," and I'd bring him out on stage, and he would be shaking a little bit, and the first thing he would say is, "Well," which would always get a big laugh. And he, in 1986, in real life, Ronald Reagan had just finished a summit meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the premier or prime minister of the Soviet Union at the time. It was still the Soviet Union.
Yep.
And I said to the puppet, I said, President Reagan, you were just in Reykjavik, Iceland, with Premier Mikhail Gorbachev. Did you get any important concessions out of him? And the Reagan puppet said, well, yes, I did. I got him to agree to get that cranberry sauce off his forehead. Now, I'm not the first, nor will I be the last to do a joke about that birthmark that Mikhail Gorbachev has on his forehead. And it was just a joke. After the show, a lady came up to me, livid, shaken. She was so mad, and she wasn't Russian. She said, how dare you make a joke about Mikhail Gorbachev and his birthmark? And I said, ma'am, I said, it's just a joke. And she said, yes, but he can't help that he's got a birthmark. I said, no, he can't. I said, but this is also the man that Ronald Reagan referred to as the leader of, quote, the evil empire. I said, she went to the cruise director, and the cruise director said, hey, don't do that joke again, Mark, at least not this cruise.
Yeah, because you don't want to offend that same lady. Oh, man. Well, now, Crystal Cruises, that is the premier cruise line of all the cruise lines in the world, isn't it?
It is. And that's not just my opinion. That's Condé Nast Traveler. That's several. It continues to win awards in travel magazines and among people who take cruises a lot. They've got their own website called Cruise Critic. Crystal, they only have 2 cruise ships right now, but they're expanding with their yachts, and Crystal is the pinnacle as far as I'm concerned.
Well, how did you go from the Carnival cruise, which is isn't that more of a family cruise type of thing?
It's certainly more of a mass market. And at the time, John, when I started working Carnival in 78, there were just a few cruise operators out there. On Carnival, as I mentioned, I was doing cruise staff. I was really working hard, but I was putting my show together. But I also knew that if I just stayed there and kind of rode the ranks and became a cruise director, I might get more money, but I wasn't going to break out. I wanted to do things in show business, and I still do. I wanted to be known for my performing, not for the fact that I called bingo well.
Right.
And so, of my own volition, and through a recommendation of another ventriloquist named Stu Scott, he got me a job on Holland America cruises in 1979. And it was much less money than I was making at Carnival at the time, but all I was doing was my show.
Oh.
And what a wake-up call, John. When I went from doing cruise staff and my show on Carnival, because I was seen all the time, to going to Holland America, where I was, 24, 25 years old, and I was working with seasoned pros. I mean, acts who had done the Playboy Club circuit, which was pretty much, had kind of, and the nightclub circuit. I mean, people who had, and even some television, and they were doing cruises, and here I was, and I really had to up my game, because I wasn't just this cute little quasi teenager doing cruise staff and calling bingo and leading morning exercises. And oh, look, he also does a nice ventriloquism show. I was judged solely on the merit of my show.
Yep.
And that's what I like.
How did you get those casino jobs?
A manager named Jackie Bright, who was introduced to me by a magician named Ward Thomas, with whom I had worked on the ships. Jackie needed a ventriloquist in his stable. He took an interest in me, and so he had connections that I did not have, certainly not at the time. And so he got me the casino jobs at the El San Juan and some more prestigious cruises. And Jackie Bright, he's passed away several years ago. He was the father of Kevin Bright, the television producer who produced a little television show called Friends.
Oh, just a little one.
But then I got another, after I left Jackie Bright, I did get another agent named Gilbert Miller, who, God rest his soul, he was the last of the real kind of theatrical agents who dealt in 8x10 pictures and tapes. I mean, I'm sure he went to DVDs, but he got me some great casino gigs as well.
So he was working as an agent for you.
Yes, Gilbert Miller. He got me some great gigs. He got me a gig in Duluth, Minnesota, as the opening act for George Burns. It was a whole big citywide festival, and it was culminating with a show on Saturday night with George Burns as, of course, the headliner. And they wanted to do it like a vaudeville show. They wanted 3 opening acts, each to do like 10, maximum 12 minutes. It was me. It was a sound effects guy. And then there was a bicycle act, the Clementes. And we each, it was like bam, bam, bam. And then they had a 15-minute intermission, and then George Burns came out and did an hour. That was getting to meet George Burns. That was another teachable moment in show business for me. I was backstage, and one of the organizers of the show said, "Mr. Burns, I want you to meet Mark Merchant. He's a ventriloquist. He's one of the opening acts." And George Burns, it was like a scene out of a Hollywood movie, John. I kid you not, in this dressing room at this huge arena in Duluth, Minnesota. There's George Burns in an immaculate tuxedo. He was sitting down, which a lot of performers won't sit down, but he was 90. I guess he can sit down if he wants to. He was sitting down. There was a pitcher of martinis, and there were 2 beautiful blondes in there. I don't know if they came from Central Casting. I don't care. They were wonderful. And I said, "Mr. Burns, it's a pleasure to be part of your show." And he said, You gotta get closer, kid. I can't hear you." So I got down on one knee and I said, "Mr. Burns, I'm delighted to be part of your show. It is an honor. I'm a ventriloquist." And he took a puff on his cigar and he said, "I got some advice for you, kid. Always keep your dummy warm. And you know which dummy I'm talking about." And then he said, and I kid you not, he said, "And stay in show business. It's a good business." So anytime I think, I need to change professions, it's not working out, I think of George Burns saying, "Stay in show business. It's a good business."
You're the second person, by the way, that's mentioned George Burns on my podcast. I had on a few weeks ago Obadiah Thomas and Mark Beckwith, and Obadiah was talking about all the great books that George Burns has put out. He looks at him with the same respect you do.
The second act of his career, after his wife Gracie, who was the really funny part of that double act, Gracie and Allen, Gracie and Burns. What was it called?
Burns and Allen.
Burns and Allen. Thank you,
Yep.
Gracie Allen. Yeah. So when he then got the movie with John Denver called "Oh God,"
Yep.
where he played God, that's a great movie. That's a great movie.
It is. All right, well, we're going to move into a little game we play called Fact or Something John Just Made Up. How does that sound?
Sounds great to me.
Is it fact? Or is it something John just made up?
I'm going to tell you a little headline, and it is either a fact, and if it is a fact, something that maybe you did or something that has happened to you, you can tell me a little bit more about it, or if it's something made up, we'll see what happens.
Okay.
Here we go. First headline is, Mark got married on stage at a magician's convention.
That is a fact.
Oh, tell me about that.
That is a fact. 1988, March the 17th, I was scheduled to perform at the Gatlinburg Winter Carnival of Magic. And Gatlinburg, Tennessee is about a 3-hour drive from Atlanta, not a bad drive. Mm-hmm. And my wife, a school teacher, She wasn't my wife at the time. We had been going together for 2 years. We were boyfriend and girlfriend, and I was very much in love with her, and she was in love with me. And so we went up to Gatlinburg, and she had been snow skiing before. I never had. And Gatlinburg, Tennessee, had snow skiing slopes. We went up there, and I said, well, I'll go snow skiing with you, which I had never done. Well, the ski slopes were closed. And I said to her, I said, if we can't go skiing, we might as well get married. And she laughed.
We might as well. We're just nothing else better to do.
Well, that night, the first night of the hotel, and she was, she'd taught all day. So, she's asleep, and I'm looking through the phone book as people do. There were still phone books at the time. And I would always look in the yellow pages under magicians. I'd want to see who are the magicians, because magicians used to take out ads in the yellow pages. And as I'm going through the M's, I'm seeing marriage chapels. And that's when I realized Tennessee, at least that part of Tennessee, is a little bit like Las Vegas, and they have all these wedding chapels, and you can get married in Tennessee. You don't need a blood test, and you can get a marriage license like that. And so I prayed about it, and I thought, I really love this lady, and I'd never been married. I said to Cindy, I said, let's just go for a ride. And we go up to Sevierville. That's the name of the county seat of Gatlinburg. And there's a courthouse. And I said, hey, let's go in here. This looks like a museum. And she said, oh, great. And she was excited because I'm the least tourist person. My job avails me the opportunity to travel and see great things. And I have seen great things. But a lot of times, no matter where I am, if I can get a good cup of coffee and the International Herald Tribune, I'm a happy camper wherever I am. So we go into this, and I knew what it was. And we end up at the county clerk's office. And Cindy said, Mark, I don't think this is a museum. I think this is an office building. And I said, yes, this is the courthouse. I said, this is where one would apply for a marriage license. I said, I love you, Cindy, and I'd like to marry you. Will you marry me?
Aw.
She said, yes. And so we applied for the marriage license, which was $35. And then we started looking around some of the little wedding chapels. And because I'm an entertainer, I said, well, let's make this fun. I said, I want one of my characters, my dummies, my puppets, whatever you want to call them. I want them to be my best man. And she's like, oh yeah, that's fine. Because she had been married once before. She had had the big wedding. And so, and eloping just seemed like the thing to do. But when we went to these different wedding chapels, a couple of the preachers, one of them who looked like Jimmy Swaggart, kind of with the whole pompadour, he said, I would not be comfortable with you bringing a puppet that is against the sanctity of marriage. And I said, okay, thank you. We'll find somebody else. And then it dawned on me, John, wait a minute. I am performing tomorrow night at the convention. I am an act. Stan Allen was the MC.
Yep.
And I thought, I can get married on stage. It's my show. It's a magician's convention. I'm not getting paid much. This will be so I called another minister who had a wedding chapel. His name was Reverend Parsons, great name for a minister.
Yes.
And I said, I'm Mark Merchant. My girlfriend is Cindy Osborne. We're going to get married, and we'd like to get married on stage tomorrow night at the Gatlinburg Convention Center as part of my act. Would you officiate? And he said, yes, I would love to do that. I asked what his fee was, and his fee was very modest, $75. And he even said, but if you have a problem, we can work with that. And I said, no, I got $75.
Yeah.
So the marriage license cost $35, and the minister cost $75. So what am I up to? $110?
Yep.
And then he brought a photographer. And so at the end of my 12-minute act, I said to my character, whose name was Snurdly at the time, I'm going to get married here on stage. And I said, is Cindy Osborne in the audience? And she came up on stage in a beautiful dress. I mean, it wasn't a wedding dress, but it was a beautiful dress. And she comes up on stage, and I said, is there a minister in the house? And I knew there was, because I'd already paid him to be there. And he came up, and the ceremony took 6 minutes and 21 seconds. Reason I know is I have a videotape of it, because they were videotaping the whole show. We got married, said I do, And I said, I do. And he said, you're married. And then we went down into the audience and watched the rest of the show.
All right, let's go to our next one. Here's another headline for you. Mark once hooked up one of his dummies to move by itself just to freak out his parents.
that is fiction.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes I just make these things up, hoping that they're true.
Well, but part of it that is semi-factual. It was not my parents. When I was on the Royal Viking Sea in 1983, my room stewardess was a Norwegian lady named Birgit, and she really kind of got freaked out. She kind of had a fear of puppets and ventriloquist dolls, and it's not that uncommon. I mean, it's not as common as some, but you're a variety performer, and you've probably known some people who just did. Some people don't like clowns.
Oh, yeah.
They're actually afraid of them. I'm a little afraid of clowns, but that's a whole different deal. But she told me, your doll creeps me out. And so there was an invitation that I couldn't pass up.
Oh, yeah.
I put the makeup room sign on the door, and this is not fiction. This is fact. And I had my Conrad Hartz, who designed the puppet that I had at the time. He was a boy puppet, and his name was Snurdly Covington. Mm-hmm. I had him sitting on the floor, just with his back against the bed. Guess who was under the bed? Me. With my hand, it wasn't remote or anything, but with my hand in the puppet, my hand on the control stick. And because I had the makeup room sign, I heard the knock, housekeeping, and then she came in. And she doesn't see anybody in the room except this puppet on the floor.
Oh.
And so I let her start her things. And I could see by her legs when she was getting near the bed. And I moved the puppet's head and said, "Birgit, how are you?" Which was followed by a scream, which I'm sure people heard all over the ship. And she ran out of the room. And about 4 minutes later, my phone was ringing, and it was the cruise director, Ray Avon, saying, "Mark, down to my office right now."
Yeah, that's something you can't do, huh? All right, next big line. Mark performed for President Jimmy Carter.
That is a fact with hints of fiction. Here's the deal. I'm an Atlanta boy, as I mentioned, born and bred in the great state of Georgia. And Jimmy Carter was governor of Georgia from 1970 until 1974. As a journalism student, I met him several times. And in 1974, shortly before he was about to leave office, I performed doing magic and ventriloquism for a big party for the Easter Seal Society. And it was held at the Georgia governor's mansion. And Jimmy Carter and his wife Rosalind were there. And I remember Jimmy Carter coming up to me. He was Governor Jimmy Carter, saying, "I certainly enjoyed your show." Now, this was shortly after Jimmy Carter had said that when he was leaving office that he was going to seek the Democratic nomination for President of the United States. Of course, the press and the rest of the world and most of America said, "Jimmy who? Jimmy Carter's going to be president? What?" But I said to Governor Carter at the time, I said, "Governor Carter, I'm glad you enjoyed the show. When you get to the White House," and notice I didn't say if, I said when. I said, "When you get to the White House, I certainly hope you'll call me. I would love to entertain there." He goes, "Yes, sir, I certainly will." Well, showing that most politicians are scumbags and liars, he never called me. So I did perform for Jimmy Carter, but he wasn't president at the time. So
all right, here's the next one. Mark once forgot his main suitcase and had to perform with sock puppets. The client never knew the difference and paid him as if his full amount.
Wow. I wish that was true. I have, thank you, God, I have never forgotten a character or a puppet. I've forgotten incidental things like my microphone.
Yep.
but I haven't, that has not occurred. I have had the string on a main puppet break on me, the string that works the mouth, which is the most important animation. And I kept the illusion long enough to make the puppet act as if he could not move his mouth and just,
so nobody's lips are moving.
And that was the first time that I ever did, and I'd seen it done before, but I had to come up with my own version of an audience participation thing where I got somebody out of the audience. And this was before anybody had one of those fancy masks that they put on people's face. I just touched their shoulder and had their mouth move and finished the show that way. But it wasn't with a sock puppet.
All right, last one. Mark is the recipient of the Edgar Bergen Medal of Merit.
That is entirely fiction and a lie. Here is the way that came about. Working on the aforementioned Royal Viking line, there was an assistant cruise director named Roy Clemens. Roy had been an anchor person at a TV channel in Sacramento, had that great television voice and appearance. And he worked on the ship as an assistant cruise director and emceed many shows. And he really liked my show. And I really like Roy. He's a great guy. He's still around. And when he would introduce me, he would always go, Mark Merchant is the only ventriloquist to have ever received the prestigious Edgar Bergen Medal of Merit Award. And people would applaud. And after one show, I said, Roy, I never won such an award, and I don't even think it exists. Roy Clemens said, hey, if it did exist, you would have won it. He said, never let the facts get in the way of the story.
That was fact. Or something John just made up.
Now, Mark, do you have an entertainer's horror story, something that happened that was just crazy that you remember?
Probably one that was relatively recent, within the last year. I was booked to perform at a private party at someone's home in Atlanta, a wealthy person who was having a Halloween party. The theme was pirates. They wanted people to dress up as pirates, and people were donating money to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And this guy, from the size of his home and his estate, I can tell he's very well off. And he hired a close-up magician, and he hired a strolling juggler, and he wanted a strolling ventriloquist. And he called me and said, I'd like to hire you. I'd like you to just stroll around the party with your puppets. And I said, sir, strolling ventriloquism doesn't work. At least it doesn't work for me. I said, ventriloquism is not an art form where one can walk around with the puppet. I said, especially at a party where you've already said there's going to be disco music, people aren't going to be able to hear me. I said, and also there's a real geek factor to just coming up with a puppet and just walking up into a conversation. And I do believe that. I think that magic and close-up magic lends itself more to that strolling art form.
Well,
but
even close-up magic, one of the toughest thing is transitioning to walking up to somebody and saying, do you want to see some magic? Because most people are having their meal or they're doing whatever they're doing, and they don't want to be interrupted, even if it's something amazing.
I'm sure. Well, but I told the man, I said, I don't really do that type of act. And he said, well, how about this? How about we compromise? He said, I'm going to have 2 bars. He said, I'll have you stationed at one bar. He said, I've looked on your website. Bring a few of your characters, if you will. And as people are coming up to the bar to get drinks, you can just have the puppet just, talk to people, and you can swap puppets. And he said, and then I do have a main stage, and I'll schedule you to do like 15 minutes on the main stage with a sound system and everything. And I said, okay, that sounds great.
Yeah.
So when I first got there, I think the guy at first was upset that I wasn't dressed as a pirate.
Oh.
And I said, well, sir, I'm the hired talent. I said, I didn't realize that a pirate costume was necessary for me. It sets me apart from the crowd that I've got on this was a fancy, so I had on a tuxedo and my puppets are dressed well. And so he said, okay, here's where you're going to be standing by the bar. And here's where, so then the guy came, the disc jockey who had the sound system. And this is where I learned a lesson, John. Whenever I go to a gig that I drive to, anywhere that's driving distance, I always have in my car my own sound system just in case.
I do too.
In spite of the fact the guy said, oh, this guy's top-notch DJ. He's got all the great sound equipment. He'll have a mic and everything. No problem. Well, he did have a mic that cut in and out like I think the signal from Apollo 11 was more clear than the signal from this microphone. He did not have a mic stand. And me, a professional that I am, I was assured this was all in my contract. So at one point, I'm standing there at the bar just talking to people. And the guy who had hired me and paid me, he came in and he said, you need to get out there and stroll around those people. And I said, sir, nobody's going to be able to hear me. And I said, and that wasn't our agreement. He said, well, he said, I'm paying you and I want you to just, walk out there. He said, even if they can't hear you, they'll still think it's funny that you're walking up to them with a puppet. Oh. And I'm looking at my wife and I'm thinking, this is not going to go well. So I walk out and like you said, people are in conversations. There's loud music. No one can hear me. I don't have any kind of portable mic that I'm wearing around and people were like, oh, hey, what are you doing? And then they couldn't hear what the puppet was saying. And then to add insult to injury, the wife of the gentleman who hired me, she was like that room stewardess. She had a real fear of puppets. Oh, she was, so every time I would come out with a different character, she would kind of go, ooh, that's creepy. Ooh, get that out of here. Get that out of here.
Oh, that's a nightmare.
So then when it was supposed to be my 15 minutes of fame and I get up in front when the disc jockey introduces me, when I tested the mic, it was fine. And I thought, I'll make it work. I'll hold the mic and I have a stand that the puppet can sit on. So I'm, my left hand will obviously be occupied holding the mic, but then the mic started clicking in and out. The sound was just going. And so they couldn't hear me and people were wanting to dance. And about 10 minutes into the show, as I was about to swap to another puppet, the guy who had hired me, he said, that's it. That's enough. And I'm like, okay. I just said, okay. I said, you contracted me to do 15 minutes. He said, yeah, but people weren't really digging it. So I had to pull the plug. He said, you can just stroll around the rest of the time. Well, here's how I strolled around. I put my characters in my suitcases. I strolled myself and my wife right to my car. I put them in the car. I had the check in my pocket and I said, goodbye. I didn't say goodbye. I just left.
Said, see ya.
And I cashed the check. And
absolutely. You're paid to be there. You need to get that check at the end.
Or you need to get the check at the beginning.
Yeah.
I always, if I do a corporate event, I get a deposit up front. And then when I get there, I get the rest of the money before I go on, because anyone who is a variety performer of any genre, everybody's had events where you get there and it's in the contract, you get the check and they go, oh, we forgot the check, we'll send you one. Well, this is show business. This isn't show friendship. I need the money that I was promised to do the show. And I'm always nice, but it's only happened a few times where people, in the words of the great xylophone player Ian Finkel, when they go, oh, well, I forgot to bring a check. Well, you better get to a cash machine then.
That's right. Or you better start doing some ventriloquism.
Yeah.
That is good advice for the beginner. In fact, that was my next question, was some advice for the beginner. Do you have some advice for somebody who's just starting out?
I do. First of all, don't go up there with just an act that you've stolen or that you've copied from a dialogue book. Have an act that is you. I mean, sure, you're going to get some jokes from other sources. Everybody does, but make it you. And then when you get an opportunity to perform, I would say take every opportunity that you can, But I would also say, don't take too many. A free show is only going to lead to one other thing, and that's another free show.
That's right. That is my saying. Free shows breed free shows.
Yep. There's a website that our mutual friend Robert Bax is on. I think it's called Because I'm Worth It, which is where entertainers don't bid one another down. You say, look, this is my fee, and if a client says to you, well, I can get Joe, the ventriloquist, down the road, and he said he would come for $50.
Yeah.
And then I say, well, you can also get coffee at a Quick Trip, or you can get coffee at Starbucks. The coffee at Starbucks is better, and it's going to cost you more. I said, just like my show, I'm the Starbucks of ventriloquism.
Now, how about the working pro? Any advice for the working pro?
The working pro, I would say one, because I've had to do this myself. You constantly, in this environment, you have to reinvent yourself. I relied so much for most of my income on cruises for a long time. And I'm still booking cruises, but I'm not booking as many as I used to. And I don't think that's because my act is not as good. I think my act is better. I think it's because I am older and they can get younger and newer and cheaper. So in order to keep working, because I worked it out with my financial advisor, I only have to work 12 years after I'm dead, and I'll be out of debt.
Perfect.
So I have reinvented myself to do more corporate dates, more gigs around Atlanta that in the past would be gigs that I wouldn't do because I would say it's not worth the money, and I don't want to tie up that time, because if a cruise ship job comes through for several $1,000s and you've given your word and your binding contract to someone that you'll do a show here in Atlanta for $500 and it's only 10 miles from your house, I think if you've got any integrity, you need to keep your word.
Right.
So, but by reinventing myself, I went to a showcase in January for an agent who books a lot of retirement communities in Florida, especially on the west coast of Florida. And I had been trying to get in with this agent for a long time. And then I had a few people vouch for me that Mark is a good act and he won't let you down. And the stars aligned in that showcase, John, and I killed it in my 8 minutes. And I booked, this is January, February, and March. Out of it, I've booked 22 different engagements at different retirement venues in Florida. Now, some of them I'll be doing 4 shows, one on a Tuesday, one on a Wednesday, one on a Thursday, one on a Friday at communities, within not too much of a distance from one another. I live in Atlanta. To drive to Florida is not that long of a drive. I mean, their expenses, you're paying for your hotel and you're paying for your gas. But when I look at, the fact that the money is pretty good, that's money that I would not have earned had I not branched out. And as my good friend Robert Bax says, you got to constantly be reinventing yourself.
Let's wrap it up in a minute. Do you have a book recommendation for us? And tell us why.
A book recommendation. I have not written a book. I've read a book. I've read several. But a book that I recently read is by a comedian named Kip Addotta, and it's called Confessions of a Comedian. Mm-hmm. And Kip is probably in his 70s now. He was somewhat of a renegade comic, but he was a great comedian. In his book, Confessions of a Comedian, no matter what kind of variety performer you are, it talks about his life. And, he had somewhat of a troubled life, but he also has some great advice about working a room, managing a room, not using vulgarity in your show, things like that. Kip, K-I-P, Addotta, A-D-D-O-T-T-A. I'm looking at the book now. Confessions of a Comedian.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and put that on my website so they can just click on I'll put a little picture of it and they can just click on the little picture and go right to it. Sounds like a great book.
Of course, they can go to my website, markmerchant.com, and that'll give them a link to some of my YouTube stuff. And I'm available. I'm out there. I'm working. If you're looking for and something when you talk about different streams of income, lately I've been coaching a couple of people in ventriloquism, 2 different young ladies who were in pageants, beauty pageants. One was in the Miss Virginia pageant, and she had taken up ventriloquism as her talent, and she actually got to be pretty good. I was coaching her via Skype and helping her with that, and then I've been helping another lady in Texas, and I hope they go on and do great things.
Now, are you offering that coaching to the public, to anybody listening to this?
Absolutely. And
how do they go about contacting you for coaching?
They can go to my website, markmerchant.com, or they can send me an email. The best way to get to me is all lowercase, 2 voices, TWOVOICES @AOL.com. I know that makes me a Luddite having an AOL address, but it still works.
That's old school, and it does still work. I have a few friends that still use the AOL address.
Mark at Mark Merchant will get you the same place, or they can call me or text me. You can feel free to share my mobile phone number with anybody that would like. If they want to learn ventriloquism, I could do it. If they're in the Atlanta area or around here, I could teach them in person, or I could help them via Skype.
Perfect. I'll put that information on my website. We won't do it here on the podcast, but I'll put that information on the website. So if somebody's really interested, they'll click on your phone number there too, and they can call you that way or text you that way.
Okay.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Mark, for doing my podcast. And thanks to all my variety artists. Make sure to tune in next week when we have Lily Von Stupp and Funny Eddie. One had the longest running weekly burlesque show in LA history, and one is a former Marine and Ringling Brothers clown. I'll let you guess who's who. You can join my Facebook group at The Variety Artist, where you can ask me to ask questions of our guests, like my friend Mark, and tell a friend that might find this valuable. That's how we can spread the word. And don't forget to go to my website to get your free copywriting checklist at thevarietyartist.com. And feel free to reach me at my email at john@thevarietyartist.com. I'm on Instagram at The Variety Artist, or on Twitter at The Variety Artist with an S on the end. I didn't have room for the T. They didn't allow that, so it has an S. Or visit my website at thevarietyartist.com, where you'll find super informative blogs and all the show notes from today's interview. Now go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.
That's all for this episode of The Variety Artist, but your journey continues on our website. Go to thevarietyartist.com for more strategies, insight, and resources, as well as show notes on today's guest to assist you in your career. We'll see you on the next episode of The Variety Artist. But until then, go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.